You're going?
Yes.
I'll do it too.
Let's see.
Okay, we have started the ZBA meeting for February 14th, 2024. We have a quorum consisting of Michael Castiglione, Martin Mills, and Gordon Wemp. Also present is the town attorney, Rod Butterfast, and Secretary Michelle Severett. And I'm moving into the meeting. We approved the minutes for January 11th, 2024, and January 25th, 2024. We have no public hearings at this time. We have one decision in order outstanding. And with that, I'd like to open up ZBA case number 2303. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. So for purpose of discussion, I would like to read some notes regarding this case. Notes regarding the deliberative process and execution of decision. Due to questions having been raised regarding the Woodstock Zoning Board of Appeals deliberations and the investigation regarding this case, ZBA 23-03, the following is a brief description of the process we undertook, not necessarily in the order in which they occurred. 2 hearings were held wherein the applicant presented their case, members of the ZBA asked questions and listened to responses to the applicant, his lawyer, family members, and several supporters and detractors. The public, including neighbors, who spoke at both hearings. Some of the participants were physically at the meeting while others participated via Zoom. Both meetings are posted on YouTube, in which members and the public can watch the hearings in their entirety. At least 2 site visits to the property at 259 Wittenberg Road, Bearsville, New York 12449 were made by ZBA members Joseph Bellick after the first hearing and me after the second hearing. When I visited, Mr. Holsapple was not present. However, the tenant photographer Lee Day was there, and I spoke with him, and I was able to view the remainder of the property from the right-of-way. I discussed the case via phone with Woodstock CEO Butch Hoffman 2 or 3 times, asking for his reasons and sections of the code in which he felt supported his findings. After the hearings, we were presented with emails containing testimonies and affidavits of support from Mr. Holsapple and other missives sent by detractors citing changes and issues with what they felt were being performed at their property during the last few years. We were made aware that the topic of this case was being discussed on social media, and in keeping with our due diligence, we read the publicly posted comments regarding the case. During a search of these comments, it was discovered that Mr. Holsapple was selling various items from the property on the publicly accessed Facebook Marketplace. These items became part of our decision and were presented to the board and all interested parties. During the investigative portion of the case, the ZBA never held a quorum regarding said case, nor were there any times in which the case was reopened to discuss said investigation, except for the 2 public hearings. All printable information gathered during the investigative process was disseminated via email to board members and shared with all interested parties. The draft decision itself has only been circulated between the board members, Secretary to the board, Michelle Severett, and Town Attorney Rod Butterfast for comments and edits. Let it be known that no overt objections from the board were made in regard to the proposed decision. Based on all information that has been presented to and or discovered by the board, a decision was drafted and distributed. Members reviewing the initial draft made comments and suggested changes via email, and these changes were incorporated as necessary into the final draft, which had revisions made through February 13th and was again distributed for final review. Okay, we have an interpretation ahead of us, and I'm going to read in full the decision. This case is a rehearing of an application to the Woodstock Zoning Board of Appeals originally made on January 31st, 2023, seeking an interpretation of Woodstock Code Section 260-94A-1-3, based upon an order to remedy violation issued by the town's building department on January 9th, 2023, after a finding that the applicant had improperly enlarged, relocated, altered, or extended a prior non-conforming use and or had changed from one non-conforming use to another. The original decision of the board was The applicant did not have standing to bring the application, and the prior non-conforming use had expired due to cessation for more than 12 months, and the 5 tenants on the property were conducting activities not permitted in a residential 3-acre zone, R3. That ruling was challenged by the commencement of an action under Article 78 of the CPLR. After settlement discussions between the parties failed, the objection to the applicant's standing was withdrawn, and the matter was remanded to the Woodstock Zoning Board of Appeals, hereinafter referred to as the ZBA, for a rehearing. The applicant's position is that the use of the property was historically and continues to consist of a residence, retail sales and service, as well as repairs and storage of vehicles, equipment and materials, and stockpiling of materials related to those businesses. Also, the applicant maintains that there has not been an expansion or relocation of this non-conforming use, nor has there been a change or discontinuance of use. The applicant submitted a recent tax return stating the retail service business had not ceased. In support of his application, Robert Holsapple submitted an affidavit stating that the mixed commercial use of the premises began in the 1940s and 50s as an electrical, plumbing, excavation, and heating business run by his father, Robert Holsapple, who resided on the property. In the 1960s, there was an expansion to include the selling and repair of motorized recreational vehicles and outdoor power equipment. These uses continued into the 1970s and 80s. In the 1990s, the applicant's brother began using the premises for his home maintenance business, which is now owned by the applicant's nephew, who is still using the property in the same manner. In the 2020s, the applicant rented out the property to other businesses, and the applicant's position is that the renters used the property in the same manner as previously used without expansion or change. Supporting affidavits and emails were submitted by friends, past customers, and former employees supporting the applicant's position that there had not been an impermissible change, relocation, or expansion of the use of the property, and attesting to the applicant's good character. Photographs were also supplied of the use and the activities on the property, seeking to demonstrate there had been no significant change in the use of the property over the years. Neighbors of the applicant's property, located at 259 Wittenberg Road, do not agree. Letters that were submitted and personal testimony at the hearings was primarily concerned about the increased noise emanating from the property beginning at 6:30 or 7 a.m. and continuing until late afternoon, some evenings, and on some weekends, and that the operations on the property have recently expanded. One neighboring couple, who has lived contiguous to the applicant's premises for 41 years, has supplied photographs of the ongoing operations, documenting the expansion of the use of, including the clearing of an area approximately 135 feet by 250 feet between the two properties, which had previously provided a visual and noise buffer. The neighbors testified that they hadn't previously complained, but between the recent increased truck activity at the site combined with the increased noise from the applicant's sawmill, their home life was seriously affected as never before. They submitted Google Earth and aerial photographs of the applicant's property before and after the clearing showing the expansion, and also included an excessive noise log arising from the various activities on the property. Complaints from the above-cited contiguous neighbor and other contiguous and nearby neighbors arose not just regarding the rental of the property to a tree arborist with all the associated equipment, but also from increased sawmill activity undertaken by the applicant. Sawmills are not allowed in an R3 zone. Unfortunately, these objections resulted in the applicant participating in a blocking of a portion of the neighbor's right-of-way to the property, which was followed by an offer from the applicant to remove the blockade only if they and their other neighbors withdrew their objections to the expanded use of the property. Ultimately, the blockade was voluntarily removed by the applicant. The Town of Woodstock Code section in question is Section 260-94, Nonconforming Uses. It provides in part that a nonconforming use may not be enlarged, altered, extended, or placed on a different portion of the lot, nor shall any external evidence of such use be substantially increased by any means whatsoever. In addition, it may not be changed to another nonconforming use, and it may not be reestablished if the prior nonconforming use had been discontinued for any reason for a period of 12 months or longer. The code also defines a contractor's yard as any space, whether inside or outside a building, used for the storage or keeping of construction equipment, machinery, or vehicles or parts thereof, which are in active use by a construction contractor, emphasis applied. In the R3 zone, a contractor's yard that does not qualify as nonconforming is only permissible with a special use permit issued by the planning board. Special use permits may impose conditions such as fences, limited hours of operations, noise buffering, and other limitations which are deemed necessary. Furthermore, the owner and operator of the contractor's yard shall reside on the lot upon which the contractor's yard is located or upon the adjoining lot, section 260-63L2. The applicant, Mr. Holsapple, is not claiming to be a contractor. A review of the testimony and the evidence leaves no possible conclusion other than there has been an impermissible extension, expansion, and alteration of the use of the property as a contractor's yard, including increased external evidence of the activity. Robert Holsapple's testimony at the first hearing was that his father was a contractor who kept his truck and equipment in the location where his present tenant, John Luther, now keeps and services his equipment. He originally testified that his father ended his business in the 70s before the current zoning was enacted, and that he felt the non-conforming use continued indefinitely. In the second hearing, the applicant's brother, Milton Holsapple, testified that he worked with his father before he retired and continued after he retired using the same site for his home maintenance business. He discontinued his business and left the property 10 years ago. At that point, his nephew took over and now houses the equipment for his lawn maintenance business at the same location on the property. The applicant testified that the nephew uses a small dump trailer and other small trailers to haul his lawnmowers to job sites. Board members have heard anecdotally that the home maintenance business was and is primarily and substantially a lawn maintenance business and not what is considered a contractor business. Approximately 4 years ago, new tenant John Luther moved in with his tree service business, which includes several employees, pickup trucks, utility trailers, a wood chipper, an excavator, a towing trailer, a dump truck, and truck where wood chips are deposited. Mr. Luther testified that he cleaned up the area previously used by the Holsapples for their trucking activity, and that the cleanup made it easier for him and his crew to park and service their equipment. This appears to be the 135-foot by 250-foot clearing referred to by the neighbor. There can be little question that the tree clearing and conversion of the area in question, from accommodating a one-person lawn maintenance business consisting of a truck and a couple of small trailers used to move lawnmowers, to accommodating all of Mr. Luther's equipment and employees, represents an enlargement, relocation, alteration, and extension of the trucking related activity at the property, as well as increasing the external evidence of the activity. Further, this also represents a transition of the property from what for the last 50 years was primarily a family-owned retail sales and service business, which is presently either out of business or severely reduced, to what one neighbor referred to as an industrial park. This transition also results in 1, the noise of employees and vehicles arriving in and about 7 a.m., 2, equipment being started, tested, and repaired, including a wood chipper, which typically requires regular blade re-maintenance and subsequent testing. 3, backup warning signals from industrial vehicles, which has been described as piercing. 4, operating hours on occasion 7 days a week and some evenings and early morning. Moreover, the board finds that the use of the property as a contractor's yard, as the same as defined in the code, was abandoned when the nephew became the sole occupant of the commercial space, since his lawn and or home maintenance business does not qualify him as a construction contractor. What began as a plumbing, electrical, and heating business in the 1940s and 50s, was substantially reduced upon the father's retirement. It was continued as a purported home maintenance business while the applicant's brother used the premises, but is now, and for the last 10 years, a similar business under the nephew. Running a lawn or home maintenance business does not qualify one as a construction contractor. Mr. Luther's occupancy represents a reversion of the area in question to a contractor's yard at least 10 years after the applicant's brother ceased occupancy with his home maintenance business, and perhaps longer depending on when the father retired, which according to the applicant's original testimony was in the 1970s. Beyond this activity is the sawmill, which the applicant uses regularly for many hours a day. A sawmill is not permitted use in the R3 district, although the applicant describes the sawmill as a hobby and said he does not accept monetary payment for milling lumber. Both he and others acknowledge that he is bartered for his work. Submitted were photographs of the milled lumber, which by one person's estimation amounted to 8,333 linear feet, being stored at the property. One member of the ZBA, who lives roughly a half mile away, stated they can hear the sawmill clearly from their residence. Apparently, much of the lumber created during the clearing of the 135-foot by 250-foot area presently used by Mr. Luther was of sufficient quality to be milled by the applicant. Mr. Luther indicated he did not charge the applicant for the clearing, but the applicant was provided with the lumber. Google Earth shots of the before and after of the cleared area show the upper portion of trees removed still had greenery. This leaves some questions to whether all the trees cleared were dead or dying, as alleged by the applicant. It is unlikely dead trees could be turned into something worth milling. In any event, the neighbors' complaints of increased sawmill use after the clearing correspond with the clearing activity, and the sawmill activity continues. Also, during that same period, the applicant created a woodworking shop in the area formerly used by the retail recreational vehicle space. An adjacent neighbor alleges the retail business at the property terminated in 2018. They state that the New York State licenses for repair and inspections expired in 2021, and that the used car dealership license expired in 2019, and the boat dealership license expired in 2018. It has also been cited in a letter of support from Mr. Holsapple that the recreational vehicle business did shut down. This reduction in those non-conforming activities, while the trucking activity and sawmilling activity increased, appears to be a transition from one non-conforming use to another. A recent visit by a ZBA member to the applicant's property at 259 Wittenberg Road indicates no evidence of the former retail use. A visit to Facebook Marketplace, an online selling venue, indicates the applicant is selling office supplies such as copier, fax machine, a time card rack, as well as vehicle parts from the former business non-conforming use. That same visit to Facebook Marketplace and a property site visit to the new woodworking shop showed the applicant is selling handmade Adirondack chairs ranging in price from $399 to $599, and black walnut slabs typically cut on a sawmill for $175 apiece. It appears from dated photographs this side business has operated since 2019. The former recreational vehicle sales and services business is apparently being replaced by a new business in which the applicant uses a so-called hobby mill to create merchandise for him to sell on Facebook and on site. This new business was never mentioned by the applicant. It also appears, according to the applicant's submissions, that in addition to the Luther occupancy and that of the applicant's nephew, the applicant rents office space to 2 carpenters and a photographer. Furthermore, given the outpouring of support for the applicant, we feel it appropriate to add a few words regarding the impact the applicant's current and possible projected use of the property would have if permissions were given. The sights and sounds emanating from the extended non-conforming uses are not appropriate or allowed in a residential setting. No one who lives in a residentially zoned district should have to live with the sights and sounds of industrial vehicles and equipment commencing at 7 a.m. daily, nor should they have to listen to a sawmill. There is a reason such activity is not allowed at this location. The code language concerning non-conforming uses is quite clear. That enlargement, relocation, extension, expansion, and increased visual impacts by any means whatsoever, according to the code, are all prohibited. The ZBA is charged with applying the law regardless of how long the property owner has resided or worked on the premises, and regardless of past discontinued activities. We must ask if the level of support we're given to the applicant would be the same if the supporters lived next door to these sights and sounds. One supporter of the applicant urged the board to do the right thing, as if only the applicant was entitled to relief. The law is meant to protect all residents of the community. Most significantly, the board must take into serious consideration that its decisions on a property are binding in perpetuity and are not specific to any single property owner. And once a use is allowed, the limit of any subsequent activity for said use may not, in most instances, be limited in its intensity. Therefore, be it resolved, as the finding of the Woodstock Zoning Board of Appeals that the building inspector's determination should be upheld, that the former contractor's yard use of the property had terminated more than 1 year ago and may not be recommenced, that the current use of the property by John Luther Tree Service also represents an impermissible enlargement, extension, and alteration of the prior activity on a portion of the lot not previously used, and that external evidence of the activity has increased. It is further found that the non-conforming use of the premises has impermissibly expanded from one office being used by a family member to the leasing of 4 additional offices which do not qualify as pre-existing non-conforming. Offices are not permitted in an R3 zone. Only the continuing office used by the nephew predates current zoning requirements. It is further found that the use of a sawmill at the property represents a prohibited change and one non-conforming use to another. Therefore, this board finds that the zoning enforcement officer building inspector has correctly applied the zoning law of the town of Woodstock in determining that the premises at 259 Wittenberg Road are in multiple violations of the zoning law. The vote is as follows. Gordon Wemp, aye. Michael Castiglione?
Aye.
Judith Salato, absent. Joseph Bellick, absent. Martin Mills?
Aye.
Stephen Taub, absent. Resolution was adopted by a vote of 3 in favor, none opposed, 3 absent, and 0 abstaining. Okay, so the representative applicants were present at the meeting. The summary of this case is stated in the minutes of the public hearing to be found on YouTube. Additional comments and claims regarding this application are summarized in the minutes of the public hearing of this case and are available along with any pertinent documents and correspondence for inspection in the Office of Zoning Board of Appeals. Case date 2/14/24. With that, I would like to close ZBA case 23-03. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean,